Zabi and Shaaban state the Syrian government will give humanitarian aid to all in need, as the humanitarian issue should be dealt with as a whole and should not be partitioned. Lavrov states that no negotiations with terrorists in Syria, and we don't want advice, and we advise others not to do so. In Damascus, hundreds of families return back to their homes in Barzeh neighborhood due to national reconciliation. Good afternoon, welcome to a news bulletin. I'm Dania Nizam. Information Minister Omran Zabi stressed that the humanitarian issue should be dealt with as a whole and should not be partitioned. Zabi said that we act in a logic of the state and give a chance to those who are misled to return to the homeland, while the terrorist organizations linked to the external intelligence apparatus talk about their relations with the coalition, and those are whom we are confronting. Zabi stressed that the U.S. is involved through its intelligence agencies in a lot of what happened in Syria, supported by Turkey and Qatar. The Information Minister added that there are thousands of kidnapped by the armed terrorist groups for more than 2 years, and the coalition delegation should submit lists of their names and be responsible for their release. A discussion session has been held this morning between the Syrian official delegation and the coalition delegation of the so-called opposition. The official delegation stressed that in yesterday's meetings they did not agree on anything concerning Homs, emphasizing the need to talk about everything related to Syria as a whole. Presidential political and media advisor Dr. Shaaban said that Syria's official delegation came to Geneva for restoring security and stability to Syria, but noticed no seriousness from the other side. Shaaban said that the Syrian official delegation will discuss all issues concerning the Syrian people and will direct the compass towards priorities which are putting an end to the suffering of the Syrian people and ending terrorism, as well as getting rid of the criminal mercenaries. Dr. Shaaban asserted that the Syrian government, in cooperation with the specialized bodies, has a working plan to deliver humanitarian aid. The UN Special Envoy to Syria, Lavrov, Brahimi, discussed in a press conference with the Syrian official delegation to Geneva and the coalition delegation of the so-called opposition the humanitarian issues, and said that both sides have expressed their views. Brahimi considered what happened yesterday as a good start, and today we will discuss the kidnapped and the detainees issues, he said. Brahimi added that our aim is the approval of both sides to end the crisis and restore security and stability to Syria, as we started discussions about the humanitarian issues as a beginning. Then we can move on to bigger issues. He pointed out that there is terrorism in Syria, stressing that the goal is to end the war, which created a suitable environment for terrorism to grow and expand. He called on the Security Council permanent members to pressure all sides in Syria and in the region to help end the crisis in Syria and restore peace to it.
لا أحد في العالم سيد كيري لا أحد في العالم له الحق بإطفاء الشرعية أو عزلها أو منحها إلا السوريون أنفسهم.
بالروح بالدم نبيك سوريا بالروح بالدم نبيك سوريا.
Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said that a dialogue with terrorist groups fighting in Syria will not be held under any circumstance. He added that we refuse holding a dialogue with terrorist groups. It's against our principles, and we don't advise others to do so. The Russian foreign minister said in a televised interview the negotiation process has no room for groups like Jabhat al-Nusra, the Islamic State of Iraq and the Sham, and other branches of al-Qaeda organizations. Lavrov added that it is not right to impose a sample of compromises to the sides of conflict in Syria, but they have to look for a solution themselves. He asserted that finding a solution for the humanitarian crisis in Syria will be sure to promote confidence in the Geneva II negotiations. Iranian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Barzeh Afkham called the international community, especially the American officials, to realize the facts better and not to make the same old mistakes by overlooking terrorism and extremism, which is threatening the whole world. Afkham said that the ugliest crimes committed in the history of mankind are in the shadow of supporting terrorism in Syria. She stressed that there is no justification to the support of some of America's allies to the practices of the Takfiri terrorists in Syria and in other countries in the region. Head of the National Security and Foreign Policy Committee at the Iranian Shura Council, Alauddin Bourjoudi, renewed confirmation of his country's stance, which supports Syria, emphasizing the necessity to solve the crisis through dialogue. The Iranian press TV quoted Bourjoudi as asserting that the Syrian government today is stronger than any time before, and that any decision taken in Geneva II cannot be implemented except by the approval of the Syrian people. Bourjoudi said that Saudi Arabia is the root cause of the Takfiri crimes, explaining that as long as Saudi Arabia does not change its wrong policy, the region will not witness peace, adding that the recent acts of terrorism in the region also show the failure of U.S. policies in Syria. Iraqi House Speaker Osama al-Najafi has warned that terrorist groups, among them the ISIS in Al-Fallujah and north of Syria, might spread on a wider scale. In a statement he made during his visit to Washington, al-Najafi called on the countries of the region to cooperate to eliminate these terrorist groups. He underlined that the American administration has reiterated its pledge to help Iraq combat terrorism, pointing out that forming a cabinet with a political majority following the forthcoming parliamentary elections scheduled on the 30th of April is the right solution for the problems facing Iraq. As part of the national reconciliation process, hundreds of families returned yesterday to their houses in Barzeh neighborhood in Damascus. Following the national reconciliation process in Barzeh neighborhood, the families which had earlier left their houses fleeing from the armed terrorist groups have been able now to enter their houses as the concerned parties in Damascus governorate exerted efforts in returning the public services and in repairing the damaged infrastructure. Units of armed forces have eliminated members of armed terrorist groups in Bab Houd, Al-Karabis and Al-Warsha quarters in Homs, thwarting attempts by terrorists to infiltrate to Muthallath Al-Na'mat along the axis of Tal Hanash and Al-Haswani Orchid in Qusayr western countryside and destroying a mortar cannon. In Aleppo and its countryside, units of armed forces continue to pursue the armed terrorist groups that perpetrated acts of vandalizing and killing. An army source said that units of armed forces have imposed complete control over Kerm al-Qasr quarter, Al-Mirandi building and Olive stores north of Al-Nayrab airport, killing all the terrorists inside and destroying their criminal tools. Other units have killed members of terrorists' gatherings and destroyed a number of their vehicles in the vicinity of Aleppo Central Prison and Tel Msabin north of Hreitan in Aleppo northern countryside. Other units inflicted heavy losses upon armed terrorist groups in Queris, Al-Jdeida, Arbid and Deir Hafr in Aleppo eastern countryside. In Daraa countryside, the Syrian Arab army units killed and injured members of armed terrorist groups. Some of them are non-Syrians in Tel Haram and Shiat, Ba'r and Al-Sabil, and confiscated their weapons. Amid mounting concerns over the return of the terrorists to those countries that have exported them to Syria, renowned Western newspapers and senior Western officials have never stopped voicing worries about this issue. In a meeting of European interior ministers held in Athens, coordinator of combating terrorism in the EU said that monitoring equipment were fixed along the border to spot the foreigners and those Europeans who have been involved in terrorist movements in case they decide to come back to their countries. Nevertheless, he added, it would be very difficult to control those terrorists upon their arrival. The British Times newspaper said that there were mounting concerns in the circles of the British government over the increasing number of those British who were heading to Syria and their affiliations with terrorist organizations, adding that 16 of them were arrested this year on charges of heading to training camps in Syria. British police indicated that about 400 Brits who headed to Syria might have come back to Britain. For its part, the Daily Telegraph has disclosed that Al-Qaeda trained hundreds of British and European terrorists in Syria and encouraged them to come back to their countries to launch terrorist attacks there. Ministry of Culture in cooperation with Lavrov Gallery for Culture and Heritage held the activity of Syrian heritage is full of joy and ethics in Khan Asad Basha in Damascus. The activity is aimed at boosting the human and ethical spirit of the children, explaining the real meaning of Islam, which highlighted the values of love, tolerance, and the fight against the dark way of thinking advocated by the Wahhabi ideology. The activity also included honoring some children of SOS and Masad, in addition to presenting performances of the Syrian folklore, including the storyteller Al-Mulawit and the religious carols and hymns. Another cultural activity was held at the Iraqi Cultural Forum, which hosted a lecture under the title, The Sources of Forming the Child's Culture and Its Effect on His Identity. In her lecture, the social researcher Sbi Sleiman discussed the cultural influences on the Syrian child nowadays and their negative impact, calling on all educational and media parties to work together on fine-tuning the identity of the child to go in line with the habits of the Syrian family.
Children, educational resources and their impact on their identities, the role of media informing children's identities, how foreign films and series affect the children, and how and the role which this media must play in direct the children behavior. We should work on the society through working with families, our children families, schools and the children themselves.
With this, we end our news for today. Thank you for watching us. For more details about Syria and the region and to view this bulletin again, you can always visit our website in English, Syria Online. And we must always remember that it is Syria's destiny to come out triumphant. God bless.